In recent years, he's become even more vocal, especially about what he views as corruption, hypocrisy, and political gamesmanship happening inside the very institutions meant to protect democracy. So when Kash Patel says he's investigating, it's not just for a headline. It usually means he's already been working in the background, quietly gathering pieces, identifying inconsistencies, and connecting dots that others miss or ignore. And this time, he says, the dots point directly to Senator Lindsey Graham, the fake investigation no one saw coming. According to Patel, this isn't a spur-of-the-moment accusation. It's the result of months of behind-the-scenes digging, interviewing confidential sources, and reviewing government records. In his own words, he's been collecting emails that contradict public statements made by gramophone transcripts and call logs that raise questions about his alliance's internal memos that reveal possible attempts to manipulate investigations, and even informal testimonies from individuals who were in the room when decisions were made. What started as a broad probe into government inefficiency quickly turned personal. And Patel claims the trail led him straight to Graham's office. Why Graham? According to Patel, it's because the senator has a two-faced approach to politics. In public, Graham has painted himself as a staunch conservative voice, defending constitutional rights, questioning intelligence overreach, and standing up for transparency. But behind closed doors, Patel alleges a very different version of Lindsey Graham, a deal-maker, a manipulator, and at times, a barrier to truth. People in power get nervous, and here's where it gets even more intense. When Patel started reaching out to sources, requesting information and filing inquiries, walls started going up. Suddenly, phone calls weren't returned. Certain files became harder to access. Even Patel, with his high-level security clearance and political connections, says he was stonewalled by individuals who seemed nervous or tight-lipped when Graham's name came up. That's when Patel knew he was onto something. He told reporters in a recent podcast, "When people in power start dodging questions and hiding documents, that's your clue. That's when you know the truth is threatening someone's position." And now, Kash Patel is stepping into the spotlight, not with theories, but with what he claims is undeniable proof of political deception, manipulation, and backdoor deals that betray the very values Graham claims to stand for. Patel's strategy. Exposure. Through evidence, unlike many political actors who rely on media drama to stay relevant, Patel seems focused on building a rock-solid case. He's reportedly preparing to release a timeline of events, publicly share declassified emails and communications, and possibly testify in front of ethics panels or investigative committees. The goal? To ensure the American public sees the truth for themselves, without spin, without filters, and without political interference. And if Patel's evidence is as strong as he claims, this could mark a serious turning point. Not just for Graham, but for how we hold powerful politicians accountable. What is Kash Patel actually accusing Lindsey Graham of? So what's the deal? What exactly has Kash Patel uncovered? And why is it sending shockwaves through Capitol Hill? Well, buckle up. Because this isn't your typical partisan squabble or headline-grabbing stunt. This is a deep, serious set of allegations that, if true, could change how Americans view one of the most high-profile senators in modern politics. Let's break down the heart of Patel's investigation and what he claims to have found after months of quiet digging. The allegations. A shadow game. Behind closed doors, Kash Patel's team has compiled what he describes as a trail of misconduct and betrayal, centered around 4 major accusations that paint a very troubling picture of Senator Lindsey Graham's behind-the-scenes behavior. 1. Backroom deals. With political opponents, Patel claims that Graham engaged in off-the-record negotiations with Democrats and political opponents, not for the sake of bipartisan progress, but to strategically weaken or stall efforts. His own party was pushing. One of the most damning claims? Patel alleges that Graham intentionally softened language in Senate bills and watered down oversight proposals, all during private sessions, away from cameras and far from the public eye. If true, that would mean Graham wasn't just playing. Both sides, He was actively undermining Republican efforts while pretending to support them on TV. 2. Secret communications with intelligence officials. This is where things get even more serious. Patel's documents reportedly include records of private conversations between Graham and senior intelligence officials, some during periods when those agencies were under congressional investigation. Why is this a red flag? Because those conversations, according to Patel, may have involved strategizing how to control the narrative surrounding FBI misconduct, leaking key details to trusted media contacts, and even pressuring staffers to bury inconvenient truths. Patel suggests these weren't harmless check-ins. They were strategic moves designed to protect certain interests, not to uncover the truth. Is classified info being leaked? Perhaps the most explosive accusation. Possible leaks of classified or sensitive information. Patel has hinted, though not yet fully revealed, that certain press reports during key investigations seem to align suspiciously with information only a few insiders, including Graham, would have known. This opens the door to serious legal questions. Was information being selectively fed to the media to manipulate public perception? Were confidential briefings being used as political weapons? If Patel produces hard evidence on this front, it could be a bombshell moment, not just ethically, but legally. Allegations of obstruction in federal oversight hearings, perhaps most damning of all. Patel is accusing Graham of obstructing efforts to investigate government overreach. In hearings where Republicans were pressing for answers, especially during the post-2020 election investigations and probes into intelligence, community behavior, Graham is alleged to have delayed subpoenas, sidelined key witnesses, and even privately advised staffers to scale back questioning. This is the same senator who, in public, was calling for strong oversight and accountability, but behind the scenes, according to Patel, he was slowing the process down, intentionally. And Patel doesn't mince words. In a recent podcast, he said, he talks like a conservative, but his actions behind the scenes, they tell a very different story. This isn't about politics. This is about a betrayal of trust. The fallout begins. Graham on defense now, of course. Graham's team is denying everything. In an official statement, a spokesperson for the senator called the allegations baseless, politically motivated, and completely false. But here's the problem. The footage tells a different story. In a video now circulating online, Senator Graham is approached by reporters outside a private meeting room. The moment he's asked about the Patel investigation, you can see it. The shift in his posture, the tight jaw, the defensive tone. He brushes off the questions, calling them nonsense. But the unease is obvious. Political analysts and even some members of his own party are saying he looks rattled. And that footage? It's now been viewed millions of times across platforms like Twitter, YouTube, and Rumble. Comments are pouring in, from both sides of the aisle, with one question echoing over and over. What is Lindsey Graham hiding? Why this matters more than ever in a political era where Americans are desperate for truth and transparency, these allegations strike a deep nerve. Whether you support Trump, oppose him, or fall somewhere in between, one thing most Americans agree on is this: no one should be above accountability. If Kash Patel's evidence is credible, and he promises to release more soon, this could mark the beginning of a full-blown scandal that reshapes Graham's legacy forever. For now, the nation waits, and Kash Patel says this is only the beginning. The pressure mounts. Graham caught off guard. When the news of Kash Patel's investigation into Senator Lindsey Graham broke into the mainstream, the ripple effects were immediate. But the political shockwave? That came when Graham himself was confronted publicly, and for the first time in a long while, the seasoned senator didn't look so composed. It started quietly, a few whispers, some social media buzz, and then a handful of clips from Patel began circulating online. But once major conservative influencers picked up the story, the internet exploded. Suddenly all eyes turned to Lindsey Graham. and his reaction said more than any official statement ever could. The Senate hearing that changed everything, at a recent Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, one Graham likely thought would be routine. The air was noticeably tense. As Graham took his seat, reporters and political observers noticed something unusual. He wasn't his usual assertive self. Instead, he appeared uncomfortable, distracted, and even agitated. When questions began to surface related to Patel's investigation, Graham stumbled through his answers. His voice cracked slightly. He avoided specifics. Rather than offering his typical firm, lawyerly responses, he leaned on vague generalizations like, "I don't respond to rumors. This is all politically motivated. There's nothing to it." But it was obvious something had shaken him. Cornered. Outside the Capitol, it didn't stop there. A few hours after the hearing, a group of journalists caught up with Graham as he was leaving the Capitol. What followed was a brief but incredibly telling exchange. When asked about Patel's allegations, Graham responded quickly and tensely, "This is just noise. There's no substance to any of it." But his tone was defensive. His eyes darted. His steps quickened. It was not the response of a man who felt confident. It was the reaction of someone who feels the heat rising fast. And that heat? It's now coming from all directions. Social media meltdown almost instantly. Clips of Patel's interviews, press snippets, and leaked documents started flooding Twitter, Truth Social, YouTube, and Telegram. On TikTok alone, hashtags like Graham Exposed and Kash Patel Bombshell racked up millions of views in just 48 hours. Patel, with his signature directness, didn't hold back. In one interview he said, "The senator is hiding behind his title, but I've got the receipts, and they're not going away." The message resonated, especially among conservative and independent voters who've long felt betrayed by politicians who talk tough during election season but backpedal once they're in office. Even some Republican pundits and influencers, people who once stood by Graham, are now publicly distancing themselves, demanding answers, and calling for transparency. Conservative media digs in right-wing and alternative media outlets have begun deep dives into Patel's evidence, confirming the existence of several documents he's referenced. Some outlets claim they've seen excerpts from internal Senate emails, call records tied to high-level intelligence briefings memos that allegedly contradict Graham's public stances, and while the mainstream media is only just beginning to acknowledge the story, the pressure from the grassroots is now impossible to ignore. The ticking clock. Patel to testify? Here's where the situation turns from serious to explosive. According to multiple sources close to Patel, he is now preparing to testify before Congress, under oath, and not just with claims, with hard evidence. He's reportedly compiling a detailed timeline of Graham's alleged actions, screenshots of email communications, phone logs tied to classified briefings, and notes from staffer interviews and closed-door conversations. If Patel moves forward with testimony, it will no longer be just a political story. It will become a national scandal, one that could trigger an ethics investigation into Senator Graham, spark bipartisan calls for further review, and possibly lead to formal hearings on government misconduct. Patel has said publicly, "I'm not here to play politics. I'm here to expose the truth. If that means going before Congress and putting everything on the record, then so be it." What happens next? As the story continues to gain momentum, the political fallout is growing by the hour. Senators are being asked for comment. Voters are demanding answers. And Graham's silence is only making the speculation louder. This is no longer about partisan drama. It's about integrity, transparency, and accountability. If Kash Patel testifies with the evidence he claims to have, the consequences could reach far beyond Senator Graham. This could spark a broader investigation into political hypocrisy, secret alliances, and the mechanisms of power that operate behind closed doors in Washington, D.C. One thing's clear. This story is far from over. And if Patel's claims hold, up in front of Congress, everything changes. What now for Lindsey Graham and Washington? So what does all of this actually mean? What happens if Kash Patel's investigation holds water? If his evidence stands up under public and congressional scrutiny, the political consequences for Senator Lindsey Graham could be severe. And the ripple effects might shake Washington, D.C. to its very foundation. Graham's political career on the line. Let's start with the most obvious. Lindsey Graham's career may never be the same. Even before Patel came forward, Graham was facing pressure from both sides of the aisle. Some conservatives felt he had strayed too far from the party's core values. Others accused him of saying one thing in public while doing the opposite in private. Now, with allegations swirling about backroom deals, leaks, and obstruction, his position as a trusted voice in the Senate is in serious jeopardy. Here's what could happen if the claims are proven. Ethics violations may be filed, forcing Graham into a formal review process. He could lose key committee assignments, including positions on intelligence and judiciary panels, and if the Senate takes the matter seriously enough, formal censure could be introduced. A public rebuke that would stain his political legacy. While not criminal, censure is a powerful statement from the Senate, a way to say, we do not condone this behavior. And that's not just speculation. Multiple sources on Capitol Hill are already reporting that quiet conversations about potential consequences have begun. The bigger picture. Who can we trust? But this story isn't just about one man. It's about something far deeper, something millions of Americans are already asking. Who can we really trust in Washington? It's no secret that many Americans feel betrayed by their leaders, overpromising, under-delivering, saying the right things in public while cutting deals in secret. Kash Patel's investigation has reignited that national frustration and focused it on a central figure who many once thought was a conservative stalwart. If Graham has truly been playing both sides, appearing tough on issues while quietly working to suppress oversight and control narratives, then he represents a much larger problem, a political class more loyal to power than to the people who elected them. That's why this moment matters so much. It's not just about whether Lindsey Graham faces consequences. It's about whether the system can hold one of its own accountable, or whether it will close ranks and protect itself, like it's done so many times before. Kash Patel, back in the spotlight, and then there's Kash Patel, a name now back in headlines for one reason. He refuses to back down. Love him or hate him, one thing is clear. Patel is not afraid to confront the powerful, to challenge the system, and to call out what he sees as hypocrisy at the highest levels. This investigation has catapulted him back into the national spotlight as a kind of political whistleblower, armed with documents, transcripts, and timelines. Whether you're a staunch conservative, a frustrated independent, or someone just watching from the sidelines, Patel has become a central figure in a story that cuts across party lines. He's asking questions that demand answers. And the longer the Senate and mainstream media try to ignore them, the more this story gains momentum online, in tweets, live streams, and trending hashtags. Will there be real accountability? Here's the biggest question of all. Will this investigation actually lead to real accountability, or will it be buried under press releases, legal denials, and spin from both parties? So far, we've seen this pattern before. Someone steps forward with evidence, the system rushes to discredit the source, and the story fades before any real action is taken. But this time, something feels different. The public isn't looking away. The digital movement is too loud. And Patel is pushing forward with confidence, promising more revelations, more documents, and possibly even congressional testimony under oath. If he follows through, and if lawmakers are forced to listen, we could be watching the start of a major political reckoning. Why this story isn't over, what happens next, will define the legacy of not just Lindsey Graham, but the credibility of the entire Senate. Will they sweep this under the rug, or will they confront it head-on? Will Graham face the consequences of his actions, or will political power shield him once again? And what will Kash Patel reveal next? For now, we wait. But make no mistake, this story is far from over. And you can bet we'll be watching. Every twist, every update, and every revelation as it unfolds. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay locked in. Because this is one political drama that's only just getting started.